Hey everybody, Professor Steins here, and today we're going to kind of walk over an ERD and a simple application that deals with vehicles. So in my head, I kind of have an idea that we're working with maybe an application that's going to help someone manage a car lot or used car sales or car sales in general. And this is the ERD that I've worked up for that. So you can actually kind of read it the opposite way. Vehicles is on the far right, and every vehicle is going to be a type of model. In the case, it might be a Mustang or a Cobalt or lots of different models of vehicles. And they have a name, a year, and a cost. Each model is made by a different manufacturer, so Ford, Toyota, Scion, lots of different types of vehicle manufacturers. So we're going to try to put this together into the database and then create a simple application that should allow us to kind of create all the vehicles here. So off to Visual Studio to give it a shot. I've got the basic structure of a website created. I got the app data folder with the database file and just sort of a default page there for using it. So we'll jump right into the database by double clicking on it. And we're going to want to add the tables in here for our different entities. So we'll start off with make, since it's the one we have to choose a manufacturer before we can create a model, before we can actually make a vehicle with that model. So starting with make is a good place to start. It doesn't have any foreign key relationships in the table. So we'll make a right-click tables and add new table. And we'll call that vmake as the table. So the table name is not just table, it's going to be vmake. We'll use a vid for the primary key. You call that identity as well. That way it auto increments by 1, and we'll be able to spelling identity correctly, and we'll increase it by 1. We're also going to want a make ID or make name. I'm going to try to keep it close to the database, so I'm actually going to change this a little bit. Make ID and make name, and this one can be a varchar of 100. And we don't have to put too much else on it. So we'll hit update and let it go. I'll commit this data to the database, and once you get done, you should be able to right-click on tables, refresh it, and see your make. You could go ahead and open it up if you wanted to and insert some default records just to kind of get started. So Ford, Toyota, and Chevy. We'll call those our 3 manufacturers for our purposes to get started. So we'll close these down. In the ERD, once we have the manufacturer defined, we can now create the model that's based upon it. So we'll add a new table here, and we'll call it vModel. The vModel table, model. And for properties, we're going to have a foreign key vmake ID. So we'll start with model ID. That's our first one here. It's a model ID. It's an int, primary key, and we'll set identity so it auto increases by 1. Then we're going to need fk underscore vmake ID, fk underscore vmake ID, and this is going to be an int, and that will refer to the type of manufacturer that has made this model. Model name, model year, model cost. So model name, model year, and model cost. Model cost can be an int. Model year could technically be an int. And the year is a string, so or we could use a date time, or really we could use a varchar. Let's use varchar 4. I don't think it's really going to matter for what we want to do. And model name can be a varchar of 50. It's usually pretty short. So once we got the database figured out for that one, one other thing that we'll need to add here for the foreign key for make ID is to add over here on the right, foreign keys, add new foreign key. That's going to kind of put this information down in the table, and we'll just want to make sure that we tie the foreign key that's in this table, fk vmake ID, that's the column that we want to be the foreign key, and that's going to reference back to the vmake table, to the make ID column. That's the primary key in the first one that we created. So Once the table looks good, we should be able to hit update here and let it run. And there it goes. So it has created that table. And you could right click and refresh and see it in the list there. Last but not least, let's go ahead and create vehicles. That's our last table. Excuse me. So right click on tables, add new table, and we're going to call this one vehicles. And there's going to be a VID for vehicle ID. It too is going to be an identity, an auto incrementing number. So we'll be able to create other ones of it. The model ID is going to be the one that lets us know which model it is, and then by extension which make it came from. So we'll need to store a property for that, fk underscore v model ID, v model ID, and that's going to be an int. And then vehicle color. So the color, manufacturers can get pretty crazy with their colors, but we'll just say that it's a varchar of 50, and that'll define that field. So we'll go ahead and click update and let this one run as well. And when all is said and done, when we right click on tables, we should have 3 tables. Didn't do this. vModel ID is a primary key, is a foreign key, so we need to make sure we add foreign keys to table down here, and this is going to be to vehicles to model. And the column in this table is fk underscore v model ID, and that is going to reference the vModel table to the model ID column. Yep, there we go. So should be able to run an update on this again and let it roll, and we should be pretty good to go. We can always test to make sure that we created our database correctly. Go back to Solution Explorer. This is just the default page that we created that inherits from the master page. And really we're going to want to solve our business intelligence in this page. So I'll go ahead and put that in there now. And we'll put one sort of down here at the bottom for all the records. So this will help us make sure it is created the way we intend it to. And you can do that by pulling out an SQL data source control, sticking it on the page, and a grid view control, and sticking it on the page. And then we go over into split view. We should be able to select the data source, configure it so that it's using our CARDB MDF file, or whatever you named it. Save the connection string as something that you'll remember later. My con string, something short, easy to remember. When you get to the page that asks you to use a SQL statement, you can create a custom one and use the query builder, and if you did this correctly, you should be able to see your 3 entities you created here and add them to the design surface. And once you do that, you'll get a little screen kind of behind it, and this will show your database layout. So should look pretty similar to what we did, except backwards. It put vehicles, model, make. We could select all the vehicles and kind of combine all the data together. So if we select the star columns, we're going to basically select all the fields from the different tables and interjoin them on the primary and foreign keys. So where foreign key vModel ID is equal to the vModel model ID, and the foreign key vModel foreign K make ID is equal to the vMake make ID table. It's a little bit small down there to read that SQL statement, but it's going to create it for us. And you could do a little execute query. We don't have hardly any data in the database, so we're not going to get anything good, but at least it'll let you know that you did kind of create the statement successfully. Once you do finish that up, and just make sure you attach your grid view to the SQL data source control, and if it gives you all these columns data, one of the things you can do to simplify this is just get rid of all the columns attributes and change auto generate columns to true. This will help make this a little bit easier, and we probably don't need the data key names for what we want to accomplish here. So it's not going to print anything out for us right off the bat. We can also change some names. SDS cars, grid view cards, something that we can remember. Off the bat, it's probably not going to give us a whole lot of data. So when we open up and run this page in the browser, we're probably not going to get anything good out of it. No records are going to show yet, but as we create our other entities, we'll be able to get them going. So we have 3 entities, so we need sort of 3 create pages, one for adding manufacturer, add model, and add vehicle. So over here on the right, we can do that, add a new web form with master page, or you can get it through the new items listing, web form with master page, and we can call this add make.aspx. Choose our master page. And this page will be for adding new manufacturers. Really, we just need a label. Well, we need a H2 tag that says add makes. That'll help us see what's there. An SQL data source control, sort of down at the bottom too, for SDS makes, and a grid view for grid view makes. This should help us see which ones we're talking about when we're specifically split view. Specifically looking at those, so we can kind of configure the data source similar to before, except this time, since we're dealing with makes, we'll choose the vmake table and just select all the data from there. You could order it by something if you wanted to, but really we just want to see the 3 records, the few records that we typed in, and attach them to the control. Then set the grid view to use that SGS makes control, and similarly, if these columns give you some pain, you can just kind of remove them and change auto generate columns to true, and then that one's not technically needed either. So this would actually show us on our page, if we were to create it, the list of the ones that we already have, the ones that I kind of hand entered there into the browser. But we'll want to create a new one, so a label for to give it a name. So we'll call this label make, and the text on it is going to be make, and associated control ID, we're going to call it text make. We haven't created that control yet, but we can just drag it from the box and put it on the page. It's a text make. After the text box, we probably want to put in a break tag. Probably wouldn't hurt to put in a break tag before that grid view layout too. And we'll need a button so that when we click on something, we can make something happen, and a literal control where we can write something out to the page stating that we have successfully executed something. So we'll change some names here and some text just to kind of help make it look a little bit more official looking, I guess. And when you're ready, and it kind of looks like what you want it to look like, we just want to be able to type something in and hit go. Back in Visual Studio, you can just double click on the submit button, and that'll kick off the code behind page where you can put in some event text for when the button is clicked. Similar to last week's lab, we'll want to kind of insert the data into the database. So we're going to need the con string, my con string, and that is going to be from the system.configuration manager, configuration manager, somewhere down here in the list, dot connection strings, and this is an array. So in square brackets, we'll give it the same name of the connection we used, which was my con string. I kind of used the same variable there, my con string dot connection string. That's basically going to pull out the connection string to the database from the web.config file, similar to last week, so that when we do want to create the connection to the database, we already have it stored for us. We're going to want a SQL statement to execute, so string MySQL, and we're going to insert into the vmake table at the or make name column values, and the values inside of there are going to be at make name. And your SQL statement's going to need to match what you created in your database, so that's why I like to keep it pretty close for instances like this. So now that we know our connection string and we know which SQL statement that we want to execute, the next thing to do is to go ahead and start creating the connection in the command. So using SQL connection, and if you don't get the extra typing in here where you can find it in the code editor, you can come up to the top and use an import using system.data.sql client. Alright, hold on. Do your thing. Using system.data.sql client. So that should make it so that when you start typing down here, SQL connection, you actually kind of get it without having to use the full path in your code down here. We'll call this my con, C-O-N, for my connection, and this is going to be a new SQL connection, and we're going to toss in my con string as the connection string info and how to connect to it, to parentheses, square brackets. Once the connection is good, we'll use another using command to create an SQL command. That is parentheses, sorry, SQL command. I'm going to call it my com, C-O-M, oops, and that's going to be a new SQL command. You can choose some different variables if you like. It's kind of up to you, but in the command we're going to want to use MySQL as the SQL statement to execute, and my con as the connection that it needs to execute against. Once the command is set up and ready to start going, we need to add parameters to it. So my com.parameters.add with value, add the make name parameter, and we're going to use the text make.text that was written into the box, capital T. Once the parameter is joined, we'll want to fire off and submit this thing. So we're going to my con open the connection, and then my com, missed a semicolon there, open the connection. My com, C-O-N, dot execute non-query is going to execute the SQL statement, and then we'll close out the connection after we're done. Always good practice to always close a connection when you are finished using it. Once it's done, label out .text. We'll say that it was successfully inserted. And once you make changes in your code behind file, you're going to want to make sure that you save all your documents and go to build out a solution, have it compile itself. Hopefully you get no errors down here at the bottom. And then when we go to create it in here, when we want to type in a new make or model, who am I missing here? Dodge, missing a Dodge. So, and we hit go. It'll say that it's successfully inserted, even though it didn't actually go. It's actually in the database. So we might want to do here is do a grid view makes.databind after it's been inserted. That way it'll update the grid view at the bottom of the page. So we'll try this one more time. I gotta think of another manufacturer that's here, so maybe Lexus, and we hit submit. Lexus will show up in the listing. So that's pretty good for add makes. We've gotten that one made out pretty good. We're going to do something very similar with add models. So we're going to create a new web form with master page, and we'll call this one add models ASPX, and choose our site master page to create it. In similar fashion, we can create an SQL data source control, drop it on the page in a grid view. That way we can print all these things out. We might need to do a build here. When you first create a new page, sometimes you need to do a build. That way the page kind of knows everything about itself. It seems kind of weird, but it is kind of a thing. SQL data source and grid view. You can split it in view. For some reason these weren't given IDs. We probably do want to do that. So SDS makes and ID equals grid view makes. Grid view makes the data source ID, or well, we'll get there. So on the data source control, we'll want to configure the data source, choose our con string that we created before. This time we're worried about the models, and we're going to want to print out all the things that are related to that. You could order by if you'd like. and hit finish. You could test query, but since we have no records this time, this isn't going to give us much other than just a listing. So we'll hit finish and let it do its thing, where it's going to scaffold out the rest of that information there. And then in the grid view, we can make sure we choose the data source to be SDS makes. And if you have an issue with all the extra columns, like before, you can take those out and churn auto-generate columns to true to get it going. And again, you might have to do some little bit of jimmy in here, especially the first time through, to build this solution, make sure that there's no errors. And even if you kind of get this bug here, sometimes if you close it down and open it back up, those will go away. So we got no data, which is fine. We're going to kind of get there. Similar to what we did before, we'll create us a couple labels here, label control and a text box. And the first one that we're trying to build in the ERD is for model name, or yeah, we'll go with model name first. So label name, text name, label is name, and associated control ID is text name. I'll put in a break tag and add another set of these. You kind of can copy and paste them, I guess. No reason why you can't. Just be careful that you do rename all the things in it. So this one would be for label year, label year, label year, text year. Associated control ID is text year. And in the text, it's year. Another break tag, and we want a third field. So we'll do, this one is label cost, text cost, cost, text cost, and a break tag. Now when we go to choose which manufacturer made this model, we already know what manufacturers there are, right? So we're going to want to give that as an option on the form. Now we can do that with kind of starting with a label. It's a good place to start. And we'll call this one label make. And the make for the text. I'm actually going to create it as a drop-down list. So as associated control ID, I'm going to name that DDL make. That's just my nomenclature for using that sort of thing. We're going to need an SQL data source on the page for SDS makes. Or actually, this technically would be SDS models, and grid view of models. Getting myself confused. Let me make sure that SQL statement's what I expected to be. Select for models. Yeah, so that was more correct. This SQL statement, though, this SQL data source control, when we go through and configure it with the connection string and trying to create the things, we're going to actually want to pull the make ID and the make name from that table and hit next. And we should get our list that we had when we built the previous page and hit finish. Sort of the cool thing here that we're going to do, I'm going to put another break tag kind of a little bit lower here, is that we're going to use an SQL or an ASP drop-down list this time, and we'll call it DDS or DDL make. That way it matches the label. And in the code editor, you can actually combine this to use a data source. So if you just hit the little thing for the drop-down, choose data source, what we'll choose is from SDS make, we're going to want to use, and you might have to hit refresh screen down here, from the SDS make data source control that we use, the data field to display is actually going to be the make name. The data field for value is make ID. So we'll click OK here for those two. You could have also just typed those onto the control itself, these two fields, after you tied in the data source. So if you, yep. There's a couple other things you could add here. If you wanted to add your own text equals select one, and then give it a value of blank string, You might also have to add append data pound items as true. And what this will do is it'll put a default option of select one on there. We'll do a build just to be sure. And then add the other ones on it. So if we do a add make here, view in browser, we should get something that's pretty close. There's our makes, or I wanted add models, sorry. View in browser. So name, year, cost, and model, and then we kind of had the list. If you do an inspect element and look at it, this is really just a select a drop-down list with option tags, and the value is the primary key. So another break tag, now we just need a button so that when we click it, we can insert it to the database, and then after the button, we're going to want to put a literal down on it so that we can say that it was updated when that occurred. So label out for this sucker, and button go for the button, and submit for the text on it. We'll double click on it, set the click handler and the code behind. And our code for this is going to be pretty similar to what we used last time. You got to be kind of careful in copy and paste, but we're really kind of really close to doing this exact same thing. So we'll just kind of copy this over and edit it as needed. One of the things that we need to change is that this is going to be GV models that we want to data bind after we successfully commit it. We're also going to want to put that using import up at the top. I just used the little code editor to do it for me automatically, but that should get it there. And we're going to be inserting into the vModel table this time, and in the vModel table there is a foreign key for vMake ID, model name, model year, model cost. So model name, model year, model cost, and fk underscore vMake ID. F square, as long as it matches what's in the database, that's what's important. Add this to a new line. Values need to be in the same order, so at model name, comma, at model year, comma, at model cost, at model you can go all the way, we'll just call it at model make. We'll open the connection, or create the connection, create the command. We need to add our variables here for the different values. So at model name is going to be from the text box on the page, text name.text. We're going to want to create another parameter here for at model year, and that is going to be from the text year.text. We're going to want another one for the at model cost, and that is going to be from the text box for cost.text. And finally, the last one that we're going to need is for at model make, which is going to be the drop-down list selected value. So ddl make dot selected value will return that primary key that's associated with it. And that should pretty well work. We'll do a build here just to make sure that we are doing pretty well. We'll go back to our form and reload it and see where we're at. And it looks like we can now add a Mustang 2014 for $20,000, and that should be a Ford. Hit submit, and we now have that information in the database. So it's Mustang 2014, and this primary key of vMake ID will refer back to Ford in the make table. Let's go ahead and add Escort. It's a Ford 117, probably cheaper, 1500, and go. We'll add a Tundra. That's a truck by Toyota. They are very expensive, 35,000, and submit. And we can also put in a Tacoma. 2018 for slightly less than that probably. The Tundra's being a bigger truck, so 30 and submit. Hopefully get the idea there. So we've got makes, we've got models. Now it's time to actually create vehicles. So we'll make one last page. We'll add a new item here, or web form with master page. We're going to call this add vehicle.aspx, and this will be for creating vehicles on the master page, or using the master page, sorry. Similar to other pages, or, well, technically we're kind of reading all the pages on the report, so we won't worry about doing an SQL data source control here. For the last entity, really we just need the model ID and the color, but it's not always typically how this, the web form is created. A lot of times you might have to choose which make and then which model, and that's kind of what we're going to try to accomplish here. So let's start with the H2 tag for add vehicle. That way we know what the purpose of this page is all about. We'll add a label here. Might need to do a compile build, and if you want these little green things to go away, just close it and reopen it. It should be good. This is going to be for label color, and associated control ID is going to be text color. You could also use a drop-down list if you wanted to. I'm going to let you choose how you want to do this one yourself. ID equals text color. Run at server. Add a break tag. So to give the user some options here for the make and the model, I'll go ahead and, just since we're here, we'll go ahead and put in a button and a literal. That way we can submit it and write that we did, and do the general things there. An SQL data source would be a good place to start here. So the way I'm going to build my form is that I want my user to choose which manufacturer they want first. So this is really going to be SDS make again. And then after they create that one, we'll tie that to a drop-down list. So really we need a label here for make. Label make. Associated control ID. This is going to be a drop-down list for make. SDS make is the SQL data source, and we'll drop a drop-down box on it in a second. But we'll go to split view and look at this SQL data source control and try to configure it. And like we've done before, just kind of walk through. We're looking for makes this time. We want the make ID and make name. You could do a sort if you like. There should be some records in the database that we can see when we do that, and click finish. So that should tie it up pretty well. We'll need to add that drop-down list so that we can put them in a form control. DDL make, hit go, and we can use the little editor here to choose our SDS make data source, and then make sure that we choose the names we want to use. So the data field to display is make name. The data value field is make ID, the primary key of the other table. And it's going to be used as a foreign key in this one. So could have probably typed all that out on the data source control there without actually doing some of that work, but if we build and compile this and run it, we should get a list that was pretty similar to the last one on the add models page, where we can choose the make. And you might be asking yourself, why would I do that? Because really we're going to have a model one too, so there's another break tag in between. We'll add a label for model, label model, associated control ID is text model, and we'll add a drop-down list here, DDL model, And we're not going to do the automatic control with the SQL data source in this one. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that when this drop-down list, the make one drop-down list, gets executed, what's going to occur is that it'll populate the model list here with the ones that we selected that are valid models of that make. To do that, we need to add a couple properties on this drop-down list. One of them is auto postback equals true. What this will do is that when we actually change which one is selected in the list, we're actually going to send the data back to the server. That gives us an opportunity to make some more decisions and send back a changed result. The other thing that we need to do is that when the selected unselected index changed, this is going to be a function that we're going to want to create, and you can just do the create new event option here. What this will do is it'll wire in the code behind page a function that's going to execute when this occurs. So if we look in the add vehicle background page, there is a DDL make selected index changed, and this function should kick off every time we change that make list. Now, similar to what we did in previous lab in the previous part where we had the information to pull stuff out of the database, we're going to kind of still want to do that here. This is a very common design pattern that you end up using in a lot of places. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste it in here. That way we can see it, but instead of using an insert statement, we're actually going to want to write a select statement. So this is going to be a select from the models table, we want to select the model ID and the model name from the vModels table, where the f key underscore v make ID, that's the foreign key for models, where that foreign model ID is going to be equal to some query string that we're going to send back. So we'll call it fkv make ID. You don't need that last parenthesis there. We'll do the import, make sure that these things are what they expect them to be, and we don't need all the parameters anymore. We just have the one parameter that we're going to want to use, and that is going to be from the DDL make selected value. So kind of lucky that we don't have to change anything there. I did use a different parameter name, so we just need to make sure that they do match here, and they do. That way they do match. When we do this, though, execute non-query actually returns no results. So instead of doing this part, we're going to kind of start over a little bit. And how we're going to accomplish this is through an SQL adapter. SQL data adapter is an object, and we're going to call it my data because it's going to signify the data that's being stored. And it's going to be a new data set object. So kind of similar here is that data set might not be in scope, but if you do a little show potential fixes, you'll see that there's a using system.data. You can also just kind of type that up there at the top if you wanted to, but I'll use the little code editor here to stick it up there at the top. So using system.data, using system.data.sql client. Oh, I'm sorry, that's getting a little ahead of myself here. This is SQL data adapter. And we'll use the mycom command. I got a little ahead of myself. So SQL data adapter is kind of a specialized command. We're going to call it my data, or my reader rather. Kind of skipping a line in my notes. And this is going to read our data from our command. So SQL data reader reads the returned results from the executed SQL statement. Once we do that, then we can use a data set. Again, I kind of got a little ahead of myself in my notes over here. And that's going to be a new data set. It's going to be a blank data set, and what we're going to want to do is use the myReader, which is the results returned from the SQL statement, to fill this myData object. So we're returning the data from the database. We're going to put it in a data set, and then we're going to fill that data set. We're going to fill that data. We're creating a data set, then we're going to fill that data set. Once that data set is full, then we can look at the DDL model table and say that we want to set the data source to that equal to this my data thing that we just filled from the reader. And we'll want to make sure that we also set the data value field, DDL model dot data value field is going to be equal to model ID. That is the primary key. And DDL model dot data value field, data text field, text field is going to be the model name. So we're going to use the make that was selected in the first drop-down box to set the other drop-down box. One of the things we're also going to do is DDL model. We want to probably clear out any of the items that were there before. So we'll clear out everything that was attached in the drop-down, in the model drop-down before. We'll combine the DDL model dot data bind it. Data bind. Got a little ahead of myself there again too. We'll data bind the data, and then we'll probably still want to go in and insert an item at position 0. That's going to be the first one in the list, and it's going to be a new list item that just says select 1, and it's going to have a value comma of 0 or a blank string, probably blank string. So this looks pretty good. Let's do a build here and see what this created for us. So if we go back and look at our list and load up our vehicle, unable to find control ID text model as associated with a label model. Looks like I foobarred the pooch here. DDL model, text model. Did I copy something in here that did not? Oh, yeah. DDL model is the one that label is associated with. So forward is should not be selected by default, honestly. Let's see here. Make selected index changed. Looks like we lost our default item in the drop-down list. So let's add that back in. It's text equals select 1, and value is blank. And we'll make sure that we append data bound items is true, just to make sure that we didn't lose anything. So let's try that one more time. We basically want a default one there. See how there's nothing in model right now? We want a default one. That way when we select it, v models is a wrong SQL statement because it is v model with no S. Gotta love debugging, right? You always that one keystroke. Alright, let's try that one more time. So label color, we'll select forward, and we got R2 forward in the list. We select Toyota, we get R2 Toyotas in the list. So that's pretty cool. Back over here, so we technically have those two drop-down boxes working the way that we want them to. We just need to add, I think that's it. Looking at the ERD, model ID, vehicle color. We have the model ID on the table at this point. So really we just need to make it so that when we click the button, we insert into the database, steal some of the code that we used before so that we don't have to type it all out over again. This time we're inserting into the vehicles table, vehicles table. We're going to insert the V color and the V make. And we don't need these other bits here. And values at the color and at the make. And I'm kind of realizing that vmake is not what we intended it to be. It'd be fk underscore v model ID. fk underscore v model ID. We can call it vmake here. That's fine. We'll take out 2 of these because we only need 2. We need the v color, and that we put in as a text color.text. You could use a drop-down list there if you like, or normalize that out even. And ddl make.selected value is going to be our fk, our vmake value. We don't have a database we don't have one to define, so we'll do a build here. I think we're pretty good. We're going to insert that record to the database now. So if we wanted a blue Toyota Tacoma and hit submit, it'll be successfully inserted. And if we go back to our original page where we were trying to build out our intelligence rules, we'll now have our blue Ford Escort. Is totally not what I expected to be in the list there. What? Let's see. Let's try that again, shall we? Let's go with the blue Ford Mustang. Okay, hit submit. Successfully inserted. Let's reload this page. Blue Ford Mustang. Okay, that was right. Let's try Toyota Tacoma. See if we get one that time. Should have a... No, we got an Escort. What's going on here? Insert into vehicles, V model ID. Oh, make. We're choosing the wrong one. This is DDL model selected value. So if you make some mistakes, like I just did, we'll have to go back into our database probably. Unless that you consider that to be valid data, and we could just wipe out the few records that we have in the data table here. So we screwed some stuff up. Let's get rid of those. So we should be back to default nothing, and this is our form. So let's try this one more time. Maybe I will do this right this time. So we're looking for a Toyota Tacoma. That one's inserted, and still an Escort. Oh, we didn't do a compile. God, still. Always something, right? Alright, let's try this one more time. We didn't do a compile, so we didn't get the changes that we put in the code behind. But we should this time. Tundra. Haha, Tundra, yes. And Toyota Tacoma. Yes. Come on, give me Tacoma. Yes. Let's go with Ford S Mustang Blue, and yes, we're good. Nice. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the lab. It's kind of the point to work with a little bit more of a complex ERD, especially one that has sort of this relationship where you're kind of further defining an object through multiple one-to-many relationships. So a make has 0 or more models, a model has 0 or more vehicles, but if I'm looking at one particular vehicle that's sitting in the parking lot, it is only one model, it is only one make. Anyway, hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Bye.